Hey everybody, welcome to Paranormal Zone TV. Do you believe? Thanks everyone so much for joining us tonight. Hey everybody, for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, would you please give my show a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, if you would please subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And I want to wish everybody a happy Halloween. 2 more days till Halloween. That is, I know, our favorite holiday of the year, and I hope everybody has a wonderful time. Now tonight, I'm really excited about tonight's show. I have a guest with me. She is the author of several books. Her name is Dr. Heather Lynn, and I'm very honored to have her on the show. Her book, she's the author of several books, but the book that we're going to talk about tonight is her latest book. It's called Evil Archaeology. And Evil Archaeology investigates the archaeological record for the artifacts and evidence of evil entities. It also looks at the history and the lore behind real relics believed to be haunted. So with that, everyone, let's please welcome to the show Dr. Lynn. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, we're so honored to have you. Now, Dr. Lynn, would you please tell the viewers a little bit about yourself before we start the show?
Sure. Well, I am a historian and have been described as a renegade archaeologist. And that means what I do is generally not the typical kind of archaeological work you'd expect. I started out in traditional archaeology, worked for some community organizations, and specialized in community archaeology and public history. But I found that a lot of the ideas that I had, a lot of the interests that I had, were not shared by those of my colleagues. So I decided to kind of strike out on my own and explore these more alternative ideas. And so by that, I guess I'm a renegade. So yeah, it's been quite an adventure, to say the least. I write about some alternative topics, a lot of things about the ancient astronaut theories and those types of, ancient mysteries all around. I'm not necessarily a proponent of those theories, but what I try to do is I take my traditional academic skill set and apply them to some of these kind of alternative or paranormal ideas. And in doing that, I like to think that I have a very open mind, but I do want to bring a sense of, I guess, credibility, at least to the research aspect of it. I want to try to compare and analyze primary and secondary sources in a way that we can really get to the truth of the matter, because, I grew up really having an interest in the, I guess, sort of the occult, or the all the things that were forbidden. And, so that's where my interest lies. I know when I was a child, I was raised Catholic, and I was always interested in history, but history was sort of boring in school because it was more about the rote memorization of facts and figures and people, and it was just blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, history's not for me, although I was always very interested in history. But I used to go, do little archaeological excavations in my backyard and pretend I was doing those things. And then one day I found that we had a paranormal, I guess, or it was like a metaphysical bookstore. It's called the Curiosity Shop near my house. And I wasn't allowed far, but I used to ride my bike to that store. And it was so amazing. It was owned by a self-proclaimed witch. She had a couple of stray cats that walked around and a little bell on the door. And it was so enchanting. I loved it. But it was the thrill, because being raised in this kind of religious household, I wasn't allowed to sort of know anything other than what I was taught. And so just the idea that there was something else out there, I would, go and ride my bike and go into that store and roam around. And it would just be things like healing crystals and, all that stuff. But one day I noticed there was a door that said must be 18 or older to enter. And so, being 10 years old, I had to enter. And so I snuck up those stairs. And when I got up to the top of the stairs, I saw this giant pentagram and all kinds of books. And there were like beanbag chairs, and it just looked like a reading room, but it was really spooky. And I saw the pentagram, and I thought, oh no, I'm scared, but let me see what else is here, So I go in and I see all these books on just basically different religions. It wasn't as spooky as I had initially thought, because it shared a lot of ideas, just everything you could think of, from Atlantis to UFOs to witchcraft to Buddhism, Hinduism. It was just a very open store. And I guess the reason it was 18 and older was maybe because of these more controversial subjects that she had in the store. So I snuck up there often, and I would look and get some of these things and read, and I was very intrigued. And so it was very taboo in my house. So one day I saved all my money and I bought this book on witchcraft, and I brought it home, and wow, did I get in trouble. But I really wasn't doing it to try to do anything, nefarious. I was 10 years old, and I was just very curious. And so I think by my mother telling me, no, you can't have this in the house, it drew me to it, but not necessarily in a practicing sense, because it's always just been more about curiosity with me. So I always kept that curiosity alive. I was very interested in Greek mythology, and just sort of I always wondered, why do people believe what they believe and do what they do? And I used to kind of recognize elements of different religions in my personal religion of Catholicism. And so I thought, that's interesting. And, I'm not really a practicing Catholic now, but, I look at that as my cultural upbringing. So, I look at all these things like they had a similar element. And so I've always had this passion in trying to look and see what those common threads were. And it is, aside from ritual and ceremony, because all of those are so very different with regards to the cultural expression of these beliefs, but the similarities I found in the actual beliefs themselves were striking. And so that's always led me down that path of trying to figure out the origins of spirituality and consciousness, and where do we believe, what do we believe, and how do we believe. And so I've written a number of books on this subject, one in particular called Anthrotheology, where I sort of look at that whole idea of what is consciousness, and are there biological factors and components to that. And so I've just sort of been on this truth-seeking journey ever since. And it's led me to the obvious thing, where I've always looked into the good, like what are the good things, what are the spiritual truths that kind of bind us all together. Well, in doing that, I can't ignore some of those bad things, because there are also things that are, I guess, the evil aspects that have commonalities. And so it seemed natural then in my progression of researching this to sort of look at the origins and history of things like evil, essentially, or demons, or any of those things that we might consider to be, bad spirits and that. So that led me to start my new book, Evil Archaeology: The History and Lore of Sinister Relics.
That is what my viewers love. We love that kind of topic. And so why don't you tell us or talk to us about how these artifacts can have demonic attachments, possession, that they're sinister. How does that happen with these artifacts?
It's interesting, because there are some things that a lot of people are familiar with, the traditional mummy's curse. That is very interesting, because there's been evidence suggested that the mummy's curse was nothing more than a bacterial infection that came about after excavating the mummies' tombs. There's some ancient tombs in Egypt. Once they were finally opened after being closed for so long, a lot of the archaeologists would breathe in these microbes and eventually get sick, and some would die. So without sort of knowing the medical reasoning behind that, initially people were like, oh my gosh, it's the mummy's curse. Yeah. It has to be something nefarious. So there's things like that have been sort of debunked. And then there's also other kind of artifacts that at least maybe they don't bring a sense of evil necessarily in the tangible world, but they have scared people to a point where they have been shunned by traditional archaeology, and then later adopted by traditional archaeology. And one of those in particular is a very large statue made of basalt. It's 10 feet high, It's an Aztec god. It was a mother of a patron god, but it's Coatlicue. It was the mother of the god of war, who was also associated with the sun. And this particular artifact was discovered. It's actually a very beautiful statue. Like I said, 10 foot tall. It's very large and just overbearing. But when it was initially excavated, the archaeologists were so afraid they reburied it. So, that's something that I look at like, well, wow, does that mean this artifact has some kind of a negativity to it that these people were sensitive to, or was it just their ignorance as, maybe Christians at the time, early Christians? I mean, this has happened a lot through history where different sort of Christian values, and not just Christian, but usually like Judeo-Christian values, Western values, these ideas permeate scholarship. And so a lot of times archaeologists in these certain eras, if they found something, say, sexual in nature, they would feel very, offended, and even go so far as to deface the art, so that they didn't have to either answer to it, or they just were so offended, or they felt that it wasn't legitimate because it was so disgraceful according to their cultural or religious beliefs. So, I mean, there's that question where, this Aztec statue, it was made up of sort of decapitated parts, and it has, like lots of snakes and human hearts. And so it was frightening to look at. But the question is, did it really have some sort of a supernatural feel? Or is it just simply, offensive to the sensibilities of the archaeologist at the time? And so that's another thing I'm looking into a little bit. But then that sort of led me into thinking, well, it's hard to look back in retrospect and to say, what these people were actually thinking. So how does this stuff affect us now? What do these kind of evil ideas or artifacts have to do with our lives now? And I study a lot in Near Eastern religions and some different Sumerian mythologies and Assyrian and Babylonian things. And so it was natural for me to incorporate that in some of my writing, because what I found is that many, many, many of the sort of
I'm sorry.
Demons. Oh, that's fine. I have a little bit of a cough myself.
I'm getting over a virus, and I thought I had the cough controlled, but I'm sorry. I'm doing my best.
Oh, you're a trooper. But no, so I figured that these demons, these ancient Mesopotamian demons, they actually have had the most influence over the idea of demons today, the Christian sort of demonology books and these things. These ancient demons were the demons of the Bible, and understandably, because their origins were so ancient, and they thrived in Babylon. So I mean, Babylon has its reputation and all. So these demons, each one of them, had particular powers, had particular attributes, but they were very prevalent during the time, and so you can trace through history how these demons sort of evolved, or what have you. They changed according to the culture. So some of the demons that are spoken about in more of a modern Christian sense, in some of these like demonology books, or some of the older books like the Robbins Encyclopedia of Witchcraft and Demonology, that very classic book. These all sort of stemmed from the reinterpretations of these Babylonian demons. So that was something that I found very interesting. And that's when I came across a specific demon named Pazuzu. And this was very fascinating to me, because this is a very, hideous statue.
I'm going to show a picture of it.
It's pretty ugly. It's I guess if anybody were to find that, it would definitely offend their sensibilities, because it's a little gratuitous in terms of its reproductive organs, if you will. But it's very frightening. And what is so interesting about this demon, at least what I guess sort of spurred my interest, is the fact that I was sort of a fan of the movie The Exorcist. And if anyone in your audience is familiar with this iconic film, The Exorcist, it starts with a scene that is set in Iraq. at an archaeological excavation. And at this site, the priest feels a strong southwesterly wind blowing, and it kind of foreshadows the arrival of Pazuzu, the demon of the southwestern wind, and what was known as who is known as the bearer of storms and drought in the Assyrian and Babylonian mythology. So, and on a side note, the actual site that the movie was filmed in has been at risk, from ISIS being just destroyed completely. So, there's a lot of truth. I mean, the movie, is a fanciful movie, but it was based on a lot of, interesting truths, and one that doesn't usually get displayed or talked about often is the fact that it used, actual archaeological evidence in this movie, and they even filmed it at the site, which at the time they weren't allowed to film. They sort of got in and filmed what they could and got out. So it's that in and of itself I thought was very fascinating. So, but I was a fan of that, and the book itself starts with this really kind of poignant opening where he says, "The man in khaki prowled the ruins, the temple of Nabu, the temple of Ishtar. He sifted vibrations. At the palace of Ashurbanipal, he paused, then shifted a sidelong glance to a limestone statue hulking in situ. Ragged wings, taloned feet, bulbous jutting stubby penis, and a mouth stretched taut in a feral grin. It was the demon Pazuzu." And now it's just one of those things where, as an archaeologist, it really, really resonated with me. And it's not something that in this book they go into so much detail on. It's it opens with this, so it indicates it's a very important aspect of the story of this possession. And then the movie kind of puts that nod to it as well by opening with that sequence. So it resonated with me, this scene did. And it really had me thinking about this relationship between those demons of ancient Mesopotamia and Christianity. And so, in looking into this, I was asking myself, could this actually happen? I mean, it's a fiction book, it's a movie, what have you, but what is the truth here? Because for thousands of years, people have looked at these demons and these statues that represented these demons, and there's so much negativity. There's so much, just evil associated with it. Is it just sort of a figment of our imagination? Is it something that we just keep talking about? Or could there be some sort of truth to this? And so, I found something that was a little bit, wow, it really kind of, I guess, brought it full circle to me. Because, let's just say it really brought it to the here and now, if you will. So I found that it was last year, around this time last year, there was an incident, a crime actually, that occurred in North Carolina. It was a gruesome, actually, string of crimes that were associated with this one man in particular and his, wife, and then another person was involved. And so this man, he was a self-described Satanist.
Is that the picture you sent me, honey? Is that the picture of the...
Yes, he has tattoos on his face.
Is that his wife with him?
That is his wife with him,
okay.
Yes. And he, his name was John Alexander Lawson, but he went to the trouble of legally changing his name to Pazuzu Ila Algarad, and he went by Pazuzu. So, he was actually part of this, what I found out has been a disturbing movement towards the sort of rediscovery and worship of these ancient Mesopotamian demons. And so he was so devoted to Pazuzu, this demon, that he changed his name. But in addition to changing his name, he started to perform monthly ritual sacrifices of small animals. So every month during what he called the Black Moon, he would make an animal sacrifice to Pazuzu. So, that's a little strange in and of itself. He ended up tattooing himself with a lot of different kind of ancient Mesopotamian, writings and different things. And according to the family and friends of his wife, she had really no part in this until something happened out of nowhere, and she became withdrawn from her family and friends and started to sort of do the same things. She started to, do these rituals and profess her kind of, devotion to Pazuzu in particular. So that was about, she sort of disappeared then from her family. So that just started them off as wondering, well, what's going on here? What is this guy doing? And so people were becoming suspicious anyway. Well, last year at their home, police found 2 skeletons, and they exhumed them from their backyard. The skeletons were from 2 individuals. I won't name names. You can Google it, but the victims were sort of associates of theirs, somebody that had visited here and there, and there was evidence, and then later admission of cannibalism. And it wasn't just some random thing. It wasn't like they had some argument or something. This was planned out. According to this Pazuzu, Algarad, he graduated, if you will, from small animal sacrifices to human sacrifices, all in the name of Pazuzu. And so, I can't help but sit and wonder about this. And tonight, the wind is just howling, and it's actually coming from the southwest. It's just reminding me of this demon entity, this whole idea that this demon of the southwesterly wind from so many thousands of years ago, it could really sort of, in a way, have an influence today in the lives and the taking of lives of people now. And so, yes, you could totally argue this man was just completely crazy.
Dr. Lynn, I'm showing, now you sent me the crime scene and 3 other pictures with skulls. Now, and then 2 pictures with skeletons, now with robes on. What are those pictures about?
The ones with the skeletons, those actually come from a site. It's an archaeological site. You can actually visit it. It's called the Capuchin Crypt. It's in Rome, and it's been called one of the most horrifying images in all of Christendom. What it is, it's like a tomb where the structure is outfitted with these skeletal
does it
remains.
have anything to do with this couple?
No, it's
not. Okay.
Well, then.
Okay, honey. I thought it had something to do with this couple. Let's go back to this couple then.
Oh no.
I'm sorry.
The couple, oh no, you're fine. The couple, because it's all gruesome. I mean, there's a lot of really grisly things in archaeology, and so this one though, I guess it resonated with me because it's sort of like now, like these people, killed people now in the name of Pazuzu, and so. Something that I sort of, I guess considered was that in Latin, the word where we get the etymological background of the word inspire is actually Latin, and meaning to breathe or blow in. And the word was originally used to describe specifically when a supernatural being imparts an idea to somebody. So, when we nowadays say, oh, I'm inspired to do this, or I'm inspired to do it, it's we don't really know necessarily or appreciate what we're actually saying. And how that all began was this idea that there are these supernatural beings, whether they be good or bad, and they can literally blow their idea onto somebody, sort of through the wind. And so this idea that this man and then this woman, they were inspired by, I guess, Pazuzu, if you will, to do this, then it sort of begs the question, how possible is possession? Because it's argued a lot that, oh no, possession isn't real. That's not, because we see all these ideas and images on television all the time of these dramatic displays of, one thing or another. But it doesn't have to be that sort of in your face. I think that to be sort of possessed by something means that you're inspired by it, and that spirit then is in you, and it drives you to do certain things. So in my view, this man and his wife were possessed by the demon Pazuzu. And so even though demons may not be tangible in a sense, or arguably even real, I think this criminal case sort of leaves us questioning what exactly the criteria for demonic possession is. So were these criminals simply suffering from psychological disturbances? Or perhaps did Pazuzu, the spirit of Pazuzu, find willing avatars to carry out his horrendous deeds? That's something that I've, often asked myself when researching this book. And then yesterday, and I had put this aside for a little bit, and then yesterday there was a little bit of breaking news that came over my desk, and it was, with regards to the story. And I wondered, what would happen to these people. Surely by now, it's been at least a year now. It's been almost a year to the day, actually, that they were, taken and put into jail. But this Pazuzu, he is now dead. He was found dead yesterday at 4 a.m.
The fellow was found
he was
dead?
Killed. He was found dead, yeah. So they did go to prison. They were awaiting further sentencing. So, the woman who was involved, she's still alive, apparently. But as of yesterday, Pazuzu, the man who changed his name to Pazuzu Algarad, is actually dead. And so he had the bodies buried, in his backyard. They hadn't really formally convicted him yet. I don't know why these things just took off. I mean, this has been about a year, so you'd think by now, at least I would have thought that he'd have been kind of, signed, sealed, delivered, done. But they had so much to do to collect evidence at this house. It was a real nightmare. But he was found actually dead yesterday at 3 a.m. in Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. He was unearthed, and he had a mysterious wound in his arm. So they don't really know, or they've not said what exactly killed him. And they claimed that the county sheriff's regular inmate check, they found him and they tried to resuscitate him, but he was eventually pronounced dead at 4:20 in the morning yesterday.
Oh my God!
And so they're saying now, they said at least today, the latest news is that it was an apparent suicide. So I guess we'll just never know. There's no way of knowing, but they did collect a lot of video and a lot of pictures, and I was only able to get one of them because there's this gallery of 40 of them. So it's locked in a JavaScript gallery, but it's easily Googleable if anybody wants to look it up and see even more of the pictures. They can do so. It's on different news sources in North Carolina, but they basically have had a hard time finding all the evidence they needed to build even more of a case, because the house was so dreadfully managed. It needed to be condemned, and then eventually it was torn down, and it was because apparently it had so much debris, but then also so many sacrificed animal carcasses that it created a film of mold and bacteria that was rendered so dangerous to people being in the building. So in addition to these piles of dead bodies, they found from floor to ceiling, we're talking posters of every kind of occult figure you could imagine, everything from the Aleister Crowleys to just these Mesopotamian demons, and just anything you could imagine, plastered literally from floor to ceiling, along with a lot of graffiti and different things having traditional 666 or satanic pentagrams and all these things. But the house, it was just absolutely just so bad they had to literally tear it down. So they tore it down and are still, I guess, collecting evidence, but he's now dead. So these are people that killed, ate the bodies of, burned, then buried, and routinely had so many animal sacrifices they didn't even bother anymore. They just, threw them down in piles all around their home. They lived among this. And so what causes a person to do this? Yes, mental illness, sure. But I just can't shake the feeling that there is something maybe a little supernatural about this as well. I mean, for somebody to claim that they are doing this all in the name of Pazuzu, to the point where they will change their name to Pazuzu, and it just leads me again to wonder, could this be, the new criteria or a more modern look at how we can become possessed, or how, some human can be possessed? I've talked to some Jesuit priests. I live near John Carroll University, and in researching my book, I've done some interviews with them. One in which I asked some of these questions, well, is this mental illness? Is this clearly this is mental illness? And I was told, well, yeah, before an exorcism or anything like this, they definitely, at least the Catholic Church, will definitely do sort of like a mental evaluations and different things. Mm-hmm. But, he was pretty adamant in telling me that this whole idea of mental illness versus satanic possession, that they're certainly not part and parcel. They're very connected. So, in other words, if somebody is weak-minded or weak-willed somehow, then it leaves them vulnerable, potentially, according to this priest, it leaves them vulnerable to satanic possession. So the young, the very young, and impressionable, the very old and maybe feeble-minded, and maybe just those who have had a hard time and a bad past and who are somehow, emotionally unstable, all of those types of vulnerabilities leave them particularly open to demonic possession. So is it simply mental illness? Is it simply demonic possession? Or could they be both?
Interesting. Yes. Then what about the other pictures that you just recently sent me with the skeletons in the robes? Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. These are very gruesome. It's like I said. I think I mentioned that they're usually known as the most horrifying images in all of Christendom. They're tourable. Like, people can go take a tour if they want. But this one in particular is I think I sent you two from the Capuchin Crypt in Rome. And this structure, this crypt, it holds the skeletal remains of, they don't know the exact amount, they can only sort of guess, but they believe, according to some of the records that they have found, at least 300 cartloads of deceased monks, totaling at least 4,000 individual bodies. These bodies were transported from their old monastery to the church here at this crypt in around the year 1631. And so there are 6 total rooms in this crypt. 5 of them feature really interesting displays of human bones. The first one is the Crypt of the Resurrection, and it has a picture of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and it's framed by various parts of human skeletons. And then you have the Mass Chapel, and that's an area that they use to celebrate Mass, and that's the only one that doesn't contain bones. But then they have the Crypt of Skulls, which is just outfitted with nothing but skulls. And then the Crypt of Pelvises, which you could imagine is filled with pelvises. And then an individual one that is the Crypt of Leg Bones and Thigh Bones. And then the Crypt of 3 Skeletons. And in the Crypt of 3 Skeletons, there is a plaque that has an inscription in 5 different languages. And this plaque is sort of the only real kind of message that we can get, other than this macabre, scene, this display anyway. There really isn't a lot left by the monks in terms of their words, except for this plaque. And they really wanted people to know what it said because they, again, included it in 5 different languages. And what it says is, "What you are now, we used to be. What we are now, you will be."
Oh, wow.
So it's sort of like one of those,
Yeah.
you know, memento morum kind of things, like, you know, warning, this is you. I mean, we were once like you, and you will be like us. And so a little bit, you know, creepy, especially when looking into the skulls and the eyes and the faces of all these different devout monks. And so it's I think quite creepy. If anybody, you know, looks at some of these pictures, it's just, I couldn't imagine, I've not actually been there, but I couldn't imagine being in one of these rooms and sort of, you know, all around you are just like the skulls, just, you know, looking. And I think what makes it more disturbing than maybe some of the other, you know, crypts that you might see in France or in the, you know, underground catacombs that just have lots of skulls. These are sort of decoratively placed. These are done in like these art forms that they almost disgrace the human body in a way by taking them as just building materials rather than human beings. And I think that's part of the purpose. I think it's sort of again, with the reminder that, you know, from dust to dust, and, you know, rather than put them in some kind of you know, like a general funeral type arrangement, they use each piece as, you know, bits of art. And so, and then there's another one, because this particular crypt isn't the only one that has these sort of things. There's also the Sedlec ossuary. It is a small Roman Catholic chapel located beneath the cemetery Church of All Saints in Sedlec, a suburb of Kutna Hora in the Czech Republic. It is actually one of 12 World Heritage Sites in the Czech Republic. So, I mean, it's this one's even crazier. I think I sent you one. This is the one that shows the chandelier made of pelvises and different things. But it contains, now, I mean, the Capuchin Crypt, very frightening. It has like over 4,000 bodies. But the Sedlec ossuary has between 40 and 70,000 people in it. So we're talking floor to ceiling to every last detail. 40,000 and between 40,000 and 70,000 people whose bones have been sort of artistically arranged to form these decorations, and not just decorations, but the furnishings for the chapel.
Are these just normal people that they collected? Did they volunteer their bodies? How did they collect these skeletons?
Yeah, well, in the Capuchin Crypt in particular, those were the bodies of specifically the monks, and so the ones that came from, well, they actually were dead, and they came from their own monastery. They were shipped over and then put into this arrangement. So, you know, those were most likely kind of like a volunteer thing. This other one, though, the Sedlec one, most of them are monks, but they really don't know, because there's so many that they think, well, they probably were local people as well. But there's really no way of knowing. And so that's part of the you know, the mystery. They believe that maybe some of them had to do with you know, bodies from the Black Death, perhaps, and that they didn't have enough people for the mass graves that they had, and so they just started to sort of exhume them and collect them, and they didn't know what to do with all of them, because, you know, at the point that they exhumed them, they were already decayed and basically skeletons. So they would come about with these large quantities of skeletons, and not knowing what to do with them, they just sort of, I guess, thought it would be a great idea to, you know, make them into big sort of artworks.
I never knew anything about this. All I knew was about, in France, the catacombs. Never knew about these other locations.
Oh, yeah, this is something that happens a lot. And like the French catacombs, they're quite freaky. But again, I think what's strange about some of these ossuaries are that, you know, yes, they have a lot of skeletons, but the way they arrange them, it just sort of, as I said, maybe dehumanizes them to a point where you're looking at now multiple pelvis bones, you know, of human beings that once just walked and talked and had lives and beliefs and experiences, and now here they are for hundreds of years, as just dangling from a ceiling used as a chandelier. And I think that is what leads it to be some of the, more grisly displays of bones, if you will.
Yeah. Now, you sent me a picture of the crying boy. Do you want to tell us a story about that?
Yeah, the crying boy, this one I found to be maybe not frightening in the sense that it's, body parts and destruction and death, but one of those things that's just weird and creepy. And I don't know if you've ever seen anything like this, but I know when I was a kid, my grandmother in her house, in her attic, had a picture very similar to this that was just mysterious and weird, and sort of the eyes followed you and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So when I heard about this, I thought, oh, how strange. So this crying boy, it's one of many famous crying boy paintings that were done by a Spanish artist. And so it goes as far back as, it's actually pretty modern though, it goes as far back as the 50s. But these are a set of paintings of just crying children. There's really not a great explanation as to what they meant or why they were painted, but there's just this big series that came out, and they came mostly out of Spain. But these pictures were of just these sad, depressed-looking children. And the legend is that not only would their maybe eyes follow you or that kind of traditional thing, but they would actually weep, causing tears to drip from their cane, except for this picture of a crying boy. And it was sitting among the ashes, perfectly intact and actually wet, as though it had been weeping. And so, since before that, though, there are many copies that started to become found in various ruins, and like I said, mostly in burnt houses throughout the world. And so it's sort of looked at as possibly one of these just curses that, if you have one of these paintings, maybe it brings you curses. But there have also been accounts that people who didn't have one of these paintings, their houses burned down, and this painting would be found in the ruins of the home. Really? And they would say, I didn't have this hanging in my, what is this? I don't have this. This isn't a painting that I had. And they had been collected and then dated, and they'd be dated to the 50s, like they were authentic.
Oh.
And these are people that would swear up and down, like, I never had that painting. Like, that doesn't even make sense. Why would we have this painting? So,
I never heard
it's
that before.
Strange.
I never heard that before. Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it is weird, and I guess that one, it's. I've been looking into that one a little more because they sort of died down. Like, you didn't hear about a lot of that moving into the 90s, but I'm wondering now, what happened? Are they gone now? Is this just some sort of phenomenon that occurred? And I found one of these paintings in an antique store near me, and I asked the man. I said, do you have any information on this painting? He's like, oh, it's just one of those crying boy paintings. You've heard of those, right? They weep and whatever. And I'm like, yes, I have heard of that. I've been researching this, and what do you think of this? And he didn't really know about the whole burnt house or burnt whatever. And so he's like, no, I don't really know about that, but we do have this here, so I know they exist. He wanted too much for it than what I was going to pay. So I don't know what's happened to it. But I swear, I've been watching his store for fear that it's going to burn down or something crazy because he has that in his possession. I'm just waiting.
Oh my gosh, does it look like the same painting?
It does. It really does. And, again, I found when I was a kid, in my grandmother's attic, there was a picture. It was not of a boy, but it was of a girl. And it looked just like one of these. And apparently, during this time, there were more than just crying boys or, different ones like, girls and different things. So they were just basically the crying children. And so I don't know, that one just spooked me out because I thought, could this actually be, so I'm trying to find right now, I'm trying to find anybody out there who still has one of these paintings, that maybe has more information on it or can lend some sort of credibility or lack thereof to this. So that's still in development.
Now, you also mentioned something about, are there real vampire graveyards?
Yes. So this is really, really interesting. There's been a lot about this in sort of the news, at least the archaeological news, kind of lately. Um, there have been a lot of discoveries of skeletons that have been buried and then later determined were vampires or witches, but oftentimes vampires, because the lore about how they should be buried in order to keep them from coming back, is a lot more clear and specific. So, this is something that we're seeing a lot. I guess a resurgence of, if you will, in archaeology is the search for sort of vampire graveyards. So what you'll find are basically skeletons with things like bricks put into their mouth, or you find them with like the traditional stake right through the heart, pinning them down to the ground. So this is something that you actually find a lot more than you'd believe. So it really leads us to, I guess, examine how seriously the idea of vampires and witches were in sort of medieval Europe in particular. But we hear a lot about witches, and we know it's pretty well established through history that witches had a negative, kind of. They were looked at. They were definitely part of the culture. They were real. They were considered a real and present danger. But the idea of vampires in particular, I mean, that's a little bit different. And so that one we're discovering more and more was a legitimate fear that early people had, was specifically the idea of a vampire. So recently there was there's actually been a lot, but in Bulgaria, they found a 7,000-year-old town that had 100 graves, and 100 of these graves, each one of them had stakes in their heart. So they consider it a legitimate vampire graveyard.
Oh my God! Now, where did they find those with the bricks in their mouth? What area was that?
Those were actually in Poland too. That's something interesting we've been finding a lot of is that the Poland and that area is like they had a very rich belief in these sort of supernatural creatures. So this is where most of this is actually being uncovered now. And there's been some found in England and some things found in Germany. Actually, a good amount found in Germany, but Poland has become just like a hot spot for vampires in the archaeology world. So there are just hundreds and hundreds of graves have been found on their beliefs. Yeah. So, and so it really, it's really amazing when you stop and consider then how long these I guess myths or fears or creatures or what have you have been with us in our kind of collective conscious.
What other kind of lore can you share with the viewers? The lore behind relics and haunted relics.
There are so many. This is something that, I really want to find out. This is sort of like a personal thing I'm trying to look into, because I look at this as, is this really possible? I mean, I've heard of people saying, here's this artifact, it's very scary, therefore it might be, haunted. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Or this one is of a demon, therefore it could possess you. Or, so there's all kinds of different things. So something that I did recently was I enlisted the help of a psychic who was very sensitive to certain things. And what I've done is sort of worked with them on a number of projects to try to see some artifacts that have been, described as possibly having evil to them. Small artifacts, different votive type statues that were mostly of, Babylonian origin. to sort of pick up and see, do these things, can somebody who's sensitive to these things, because I am not, I'm nowhere near sensitive or psychic, I don't believe, but so I found, somebody who said they would definitely be able to pick up on these. So, in this research, what we did was we found these little statues, and with the help of a local museum, of course. And I brought the psychic in, and we sort of just, let her do her thing. And it was quite telling. She said she almost spoke in tongues. I know it sounds a little off the wall, wow. But it sounded like she just was speaking in some other language. She was claiming all these different things, and I didn't know what to make of it. I'm just sort of the observer here, taking down notes, what I see. And the person who was a volunteer for the museum was looking quite disturbed. And I was like, so, what do you think? What do you think of this? Are you going to kick us out? Is this a little too crazy for you? Are we getting too close back now? And she just looks and she says, no, I'm amazed, because how does she know these things? And I'm like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And she's like, she's speaking in how the cuneiform would have been read. And I said, what? And she was like, yeah, that's really bizarre. And so she sort of left it at that. And I asked the psychic, I said, Marie, do you actually know how to pronounce some of these things? And she's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And she said, these are just the things that came to me. And I was like, oh my gosh, we have to get this on, I have to record this somehow. So I have to set a new appointment with the museum, because they're very touchy about who can come in with the artifacts and spend time, and it has to be under supervision, of course, with somebody who's able to do that. And I'm just hoping that they don't say, oh no, here comes this crazy archaeologist and our crazy psychic friend again. But I definitely want to go and get actual recordings of this, because it was quite spooky to hear.
Oh gosh.
So I think, yeah,
that really would be weird. So interesting if you had some of those recordings. I would play them tonight.
Oh, I know. I didn't expect to get any recording. I just thought, let's go. And I thought that, she would be able to sort of just tell me what she felt, and just maybe, just give me a sense of something. I mean, she did do that, but when she started speaking,
oh my God,
strangely,
how
did you? I scrambled for my phone to try to get that little voice app. It was junky and it didn't work. And so I was like, I have to make it a point to, what's interesting is nowadays in Kindle books, I guess they allow you to have audio. So I was like, oh my gosh, then there you go, because I must put audio of this in a Kindle book so that people can hear, because it was really, really crazy.
Oh my!
And it just brought me. I like I said, I was brought up Catholic, so I really didn't hear all the speaking in tongues stuff until I got to be a little bit older, and I went to North Carolina in this very small town, and this was one of my first experiences with an actual exorcism. It was in a place called Atkinson, North Carolina. It has one stop sign, tiny, and it was in the middle of nowhere. There was this little church, and they didn't even have a parking lot. You had to park in the grass. It was this tiny, tiny little church. And I went there, at the request of a friend, and I go in there, and it's just kind of, la la la, and Jesus is good, and kumbaya, and whatever. And then it starts getting a little rambunctious. Then they bring somebody up, and they say it's time to do the exorcism. And I'm like, hold on, wait a minute, exorcism? I didn't sign up for this. And so my only idea of exorcism was Linda Blair, and it's going to be pea soup vomiting everywhere, and the head's turning, and I was like, I don't know what I'm in for, but I couldn't be rude. I had to sit there, and I'm nodding my head, okay, I'm here, and this is great. And they ended up doing this whole ritual where they spoke in tongues, and they started having all these different things go on, and convulsions on the floor, and it just went out of control. And it was something that you might see on TV or whatever, and so it wasn't completely shocking. But what did shock me was what happened next, and that was when some children came from the back, and they were pulling with them goats. They had 4 goats, little goats, And I'm like, why do we have goats in here? What is going on? And so I'm just watching at this point. Now, I guess this was like Pentecostal. I think it was. I'm not quite sure. It was a Christian church, and they were apparently, giving an exorcism to this one woman in particular, and she ended up on a stretcher. I mean, they had a medical stretcher. They came, they came in, they put her on a stretcher and strapped her down because she started getting so out of control. She started
so this is the woman that's possessed.
This is the woman that's possessed, okay. Right? And so she's just shaking and frothing at the mouth.
Oh my God.
And she's saying all kinds of things. And the people around her then, some of them were gathering around her, and then some of they were dropping to the ground and speaking in tongues. And it just became quite a sight. But like I said, it was nothing until the goats came marching in. And I thought, why do we have goats in this building? I don't know what's going on at this point. Well, what ended up happening, I guess, so I'm told later, after she supposedly it was fine. I mean, she stopped frothing at the mouth. She calmed down, but she just sort of looked like she passed out. She was breathing heavy, and they wheeled her on into the back where there was this great big sort of baptismal tub. It looked like a large bathtub. They dipped her in there and cleaned her up, and these goats, they were going to be sacrificed.
Oh, no.
And I was like, I was like vegetarian at the time. I'm like, I am not about this animal, this is not cool. And they're like, no, you don't understand. These goats, this is why they're here. They're for sacrifice, because when the person, is exorcised, the demon, or in this case, they believe demons, came out and they would go into the bodies of the goats. So literally like a scapegoat. And that was in order to save the congregation, because otherwise you would apparently have these loose demons out and about throughout the congregation, and anybody who is not pure heart, or however you look at it, would be potentially possessed as well, leading to a whole host of other problems. So that's why they brought in the goats to sort of take on this whole thing. And then the next logical step would be we have to sacrifice the goats, and they were trying to reassure me it's going to be okay, because it's food. We're going to feast on this. It's like, this is what you're supposed to do. And, we're going to get together. And this thing, let me tell you, this thing went way into the night. We're talking like a 6-hour ordeal. And these were not people that you would think were going to be going to evening church it was a Wednesday night. It was like a Wednesday evening at church, and everyone was dressed in their Wednesday night best. You did not, at least I didn't think that in a small town in the United States, I would be going in to see this kind of thing go on. And so, I don't know what to make of that to this day. They were very strong believers. I think they had very good intentions. And the woman, after the fact, after they cleaned her up, after, whatever they did after this kind of bath they gave her, she came back out, and she was just a whole nother person. And I don't know what to make of it, because there was something different about her when she came out of there. She didn't have the same look in her eyes as she did going in. It was a little strange, to say the least. So that's just another thing, though, that a lot of times we just kind of, nowadays in our pop culture, we look at demonology or exorcisms and just see the same kind of thing. I mean, I was guilty of that, being with the whole, I like the movie The Exorcist, and it's spooky and what have you, but it's certainly beyond that. There are so many different ways that religions of all kinds, even different Christian faiths, practice and believe in demonic possession, or exorcisms, or whatever the case may be. It's very diverse, but it's very alive and real.
I always wondered, you've heard of the show Haunted Collector with when it was on with John Zaffis, and he would go to these haunted locations that people asked him to come to, and they would find out that there was an object that was in the home that was causing the problems, and that it was haunted. And then he would take that object, with their permission, he would take that object and bring it home to his house. I think he has a museum, and put it under glass, and there it would stay. But what I was wondering, and I will have him on the show hopefully next year, he takes that object, which is haunted, out of their home, brings it to his home. So what happens with that object? Does it just stop being haunted? Or does it continue on? You know?
Exactly. No, that's a great question. That's something I definitely would want to know. I mean, is he the one who has the doll that is in glass that is
No,
haunted?
actually that doll is owned by Lorraine Warren. She has it under glass.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the Annabelle
that
doll.
One is fascinating. I want to look into that a little bit more because that one's quite frightening.
Yeah, that's the Annabelle doll, and and the she has that now. She also, Ed passed on many years ago, and they have a museum as well in their Connecticut home, and I think they're in Connecticut, and that doll is under glass.
Are they? Because I'm going to Connecticut next year. I might have to stop in there.
Guys,
I think I'm supposed to have the book out before then, so I might have to go there a little early.
I think she's in Connecticut. Well, if you can get past the nephew, he runs her life. Yeah, so she's got the Annabelle doll. Then they actually made a movie about Annabelle the doll. But yeah, so I have to have Zaphis on because I want to know. And he also bought a funeral home. And he has now moved all his haunted objects to this funeral home, and that's where his current museum is. And if these objects were causing other people problems, why doesn't he have the problems? So that's what I would like to know about that. Now, now, did you ever go out on digs to these foreign locations?
No, I have not done that. That's something that I plan to do actually this spring. I'm planning a trip to a particular location. I probably shouldn't say it because it's actually with a certain television project that I'm doing. So there'll be more on that coming up. But I'm definitely working on a project with a cable network where we're going to go out and sort of take a look at some of these evil artifacts. So that should be interesting as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good stuff's coming up with that. But I've been warned actually because I'm writing a lot about some of this stuff from more of a Western perspective and things. But I have a lot of friends who are, in the Middle East, and a lot of them who are Muslim, and so they've given me a lot of information that's fascinating on the jinn and like what we know as genies and different things. And so I've been warned by a lot of people that this is sort of a dangerous thing. Maybe I should be careful about this because, opening up these sorts of subjects could leave me vulnerable to some kind of thing on my own. But, I'm not really afraid because I feel that I'm pretty strong-willed and, not vulnerable to any kind of possession. But, I am sort of keeping an eye out because, some of these things like the crying boy pictures and, burned down homes and bad lucks and who knows what. I'm getting a little concerned.
Do you have any? Do you have any of these objects? Do you have any of these objects in your home?
I do not have any. No, because I don't really have artifacts. That's something I really rally against is people owning these artifacts. That's what I've written about in a lot of my previous works, is stuff about, ownership of cultural remains and who should own those things. I mean, but in terms of antiques, I think that if I had an American piece that maybe I found at an antique store, that would be different. Like I said, I might still go back to that antique store and see if I can pick up that crying boy one. Maybe a little part of me didn't want to because I was a little spooked. Well, kind of like my house, and I don't want it to burn down.
Dr. Lynn, no, honey, let me tell you, even going to an antique store, there are objects that are haunted that you may not be aware of. You do bring them into your home. A lot of these old objects have attachments. They were just showing this the other day again on the television, on one of those haunting shows. It was a bedroom set that the mother had brought home from an antique store, and there was an attachment to that bedroom set. It was extremely haunted, and they had to get rid of it. So you are buying somebody else's memories, and and a lot of them are attached to that memory or of that object because they loved it.
I believe that. And that's, I think, part of the motivation for looking into some of these topics, because there is this part of me that believes that, objects can contain some sort of like remnant vibration of whatever, they were kind of involved with. So whether it be positive, negative, I'm not real sure, but like if somebody really loved something or something represented something that, was love, maybe an old ring or jewelry or I don't know. There's so many different examples, but I do think that objects may be able to sort of harbor those, those unseen forces and influences. And so, and I get that because, like many people, just walking into an antique store, I get a feeling. You just walk in, and I'm not by any means like a sensitive or anything like that. I don't believe, but I think that just being human, by walking into some of those places and looking and just touching some of the older pieces and just, imagining what they could have meant to somebody or seeing their place in the context. It's just, there's a feeling there that's not the same as walking into your general, like, five and dime or what have you. It's like, it's a different and more special experience. And I found that, times where I've been on excavations, and especially like some of the excavations I've done were mostly, I would say, they're classified as urban archaeology or community archaeology. And so what I've done is I've dug in the middle of old homes and settlements and areas that were mostly 19th or 18th century. And what you're doing in that case is you're digging in people's literal backyards. So we would get fire maps and old insurance maps and kind of chart where these neighborhoods were, and then, the ground penetrating radar, we'd find and sort of rope off these particular lots for where these homes would be. And we dig and we look for what are called the privies. And these are areas where people, just basically little garbage areas. It's where they went to the bathroom. It's where they tossed their old chicken bones off their plate. It's where they then tossed the plate itself if it was broken. Everything you could imagine could go in this privy. And so it's, by digging through there, you just find just household items. So, nothing like the Ark of the Covenant or any of these more Indiana Jones-like ventures, but it's almost something more intimate than when you dig into somebody's own kind of garbage from 100 or so years ago, and you end up finding very personal items and personal effects. And so by doing that, I've just always gotten the sense when I would touch some of these or look and think, here we are, we're finding and piecing together a narrative of somebody's everyday life and what they've gone through. And a lot of times you discover there was a lot of pain there. There was a lot of sadness there. And there was a lot of happiness as well, but I happen to find a lot of sadness, a lot more evidence for, sad times and different things. And so, I just kind of picked up on that. And I thought, there has to be something more to these tangible objects than just, what we see or feel or but I think they carry an energy.
Well, Dr. Lynn, I discovered this fellow who has written a book, and he collects instruments of torture from dark historic events, these instruments of torture, restraint, and used in executions, and a lot of them are connected to witchcraft and voodoo. Now, those must have a terrible, terrible vibrations to them, and he's written a book on this. So I'm just wondering. He has hundreds and hundreds of these objects.
Wow.
I'm just wondering what's happening with him, with his personality. Is he changing because of all this darkness? Have you ever come across any any objects like that were used in torture and execution in those days?
Not necessarily in that sort of grand scale. I would like to get in touch with him, though. I think he'd make an excellent interviewee for my book. So I got to really find him. But
I'll send you his link. Oh,
that would be. Oh, thank you. That would be excellent, because I definitely want to ask him those very questions. Has this changed you in any way, or or can he even identify that it's changed him? Because like these people who murdered and ate these other people in the name of Pazuzu, would they even have been able to recognize a change, or was it just sort of, they were taken over and possessed in a way by this thing? Were they even able to be self-conscious about what was going on? So, but it'd be, I think, definitely worth asking if he has identified any changes in his own, circumstances or feelings or what have you. But I have actually seen instruments of, what I would think would be torture, but they were actually legitimate instruments of science. They were various antique medical devices. And so some of those, especially the ones that have to do more with abortion techniques and things, those are really kind of sad. And there's just this feeling you get when you're near them that is because, regardless of your feelings on whether abortion is right or wrong, let's just say if you're going to do it, I guess now would be a better time to do it than then. Yeah, because the way they did it then was much more grisly and much more dangerous and disturbing. And so when you see some of these tools, it's just sort of like, wow. And, the pain that people went through, and not just the more controversial kinds of things like, abortion techniques or what have you, but some of the items they would use to amputate or, just very, large saws and different things. And I mean, nowadays we see these medical devices and they're still like, large saws, or they're they plug in and they're, like drills and whatnot. But there's a more like a technical edge to it where it seems more clinical. And the technology before now, it was, in their day, it was scientific and clinical. But I mean, in comparison, it looks simply medieval. And so to think that, your leg would in the Civil War would just be hacked off, and all these, and some of these items you can still see the blood on them. And here in Cleveland, they have a great museum at Case Western University called the Dietrich Museum of Medical History, and they have, I think, one of the largest collections of some of these items, and they are just wild. They're so brutal because most of them now, since they now a lot of them depend on electricity to be used, then it required elbow grease and manpower. So if you're going to cut something off, you're going to have to put some work in it. And so, it's just a lot more grisly experience than just, maybe a clean cut or however. So definitely some of the medical devices are some of the more disturbing ones. I would say that they're a little torturous, if you will.
Yes, I would say so. And then in your opinion, Dr. Lynn, can the archaeology record prove the existence of demons and malevolent entities?
I think that is the core question of my book, really. And thus far in my research, I would have to say, if there's anything that could shed light on that or prove it, it would be the archaeological record. Because in that sense, we have tangible sort of evidence for something. And then there's now, in the field of archaeology, we have something that's, we've had it for a while, but it's becoming very popular and very, practiced, and that's something called experimental archaeology. And that's something that I really want to put into practice, as dangerous as it may be, with some of these artifacts. And I have some opportunities to get a little closer to different artifacts, or even just some of the day-to-day ones like the Ouija boards, the older kind of witch boards and these things. But the idea of experimental archaeology is taking these theories in archaeology and sort of recreating them and just experimenting with like a recreation of events. And so I think that that's something that I'd like to try, actually. So I'd like to try to sort of maybe, I haven't devised what experiment it would be just yet. I'm going to have to do a whole look on how to design that one, especially keeping it safe as well, because, I don't want to get any kind of ancient demon upset with me, or again, with the whole house burning down thing. But I would like to put into practice some sort of experiment where I could maybe, do this. I have somebody who is a paranormal photographer, and they have helped me on a few things, because something that they have specialized in is actually finding archaeological locations by doing this photography. So what they'll do, it's almost like a ground penetrating radar, but instead they take this special camera and it sort of makes this weird heat map image that looks like, he says it's basically the auras coming through. And so you can see like an aura around an artifact. And so I've seen a lot of these pictures. I've worked with this man a bunch, and that is another thing that's led me to really question the idea of, if people have these auras, if they have this energy that you can sort of capture in these photos, and then he is able to capture the auras in much in the same way that, you would with a living being, but on an object or an artifact, what if we were to take pictures like that and film the auras of some of these artifacts or, things that would be considered evil or somehow dangerous or bad in some way. So those are some of the experiments that I want to do in addition to, some of the recordings. And so, if I could get in touch with the gentleman that has some of the medieval torture devices, those would, I think, be the best to take some pictures of, because I think that if you're going to have any really, hot spots of negative energy that could show up in any kind of film, I bet those would have the most.
If you do that, I would love to have you come back and share those photographs with us.
Oh, I will definitely do that for sure.
Oh my God, the viewers would absolutely love to see a show on that.
Oh, well, I will be back with that then, because as I said, I'm still in the process of putting this whole book together. I have a couple more interviews to do with exorcists. I have one interview in particular that I'm trying to work on. It's a pretty big one. I'm really excited. So a lot of cool things unfolding with this. It's actually taken me in directions I didn't realize I would go initially. I thought I would just explore maybe the history of some of these things. But what's happened now is more of that whole like getting into it and doing the experimentation. And that's a little spooky, but it's, I think, going to turn out a lot better because, again, I think I might be able to come across some sort of physical or tangible proof, if there can be found, of, kind of malevolent spirits and negative energies and demons, perhaps, for lack of better terminology, that could be contained in artifacts and relics of the past.
Well, I hope you share that with us. We would absolutely love that.
Will. It would be my honor.
Oh my God, it was such an honor to have you on the show.
It was so great to be here. I love being able to talk about these things. I swear, sometimes when I talk about these things, it's like, oh no, that's too much. We can't handle it. So to be able to kind of go on and share some of this more, I don't know, like the darker angles of my research with an open-minded crowd. That is just a real honor, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity this evening.
Oh, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to... Oh, and now I have your books, the 3 books, and plus your Evil Archaeology. Where can they get these 3 books that I'm showing?
You can get them on Amazon. Those are all over Amazon. You can go through my website, and of course Barnes & Noble and places like that. But definitely Amazon.
And what's your website?
It is drheatherlynn.com. It's www.drheatherlynn.com.
You know what? I have a question from a viewer. And what about the Dybbuk box? Do you know anything about the Dybbuk box? The Jewish box? That's supposed to...
Go
ahead.
I came across... all I've ever really come across on that was just a little sort of article. So I really am not 100% familiar with that. So no. I'm looking a little... I know a little bit about it, but I've not actually researched it much. I know that... I guess it was on eBay or something. So there was something like it had gone up for sale on eBay. So if that's the one they're talking about, it belonged to like an old Jewish woman who supposedly lived to be like 103. And so it was like a Pandora's box or something like that. Yeah. So, I don't know, but that would be something I think that if I could get a hold of this woman's, clearly she's dead at 103, but if I could get a hold of her family in any way, if they'd be willing to talk.
Oh well, I've interviewed Kevin Mannis. He was the he was the one that actually had supposedly the original Dybbuk box, and it was 3 aunts or relatives that had the box in the Holocaust time, and
Oh,
they
wow.
were trying to conjure up. They were doing seances and trying to conjure up spirits, and somehow, supposedly, they got a spirit into that box, and somehow it made it over here to the United States. And I don't know, he's got quite a story about the Dybbuk box, and he was the first owner of one, and then it trickled down to Jason. I forget Jason's last name. I interviewed him as well, and he was the second owner of the Dybbuk box. But if you ever, it would be worth you checking into the Dybbuk box. It's a Jewish box where supposedly they get a spirit of an evil person. They get them. I don't know how they do it, but they get them inside this box. They capture their spirit into this box. But there's also like a chicken bone. There's pieces of hair, articles that are also personally owned by this spirit when they were alive. It's very interesting. It's very interesting, the story on it.
So I wonder if I'd heard something about that being on eBay. Is this something that they were selling?
Oh God,
as in,
honey.
Catch your own demon, or were these actually demons inhabiting the box, and then they were selling it with the demon in it?
Oh well,
is that something
I wouldn't buy anything off of eBay. But except that's actually where Kevin Manus, I think that's where he actually bought. There was this kid that got it at a the store. I think there was this kid that got it at a garage sale, and he was selling it on eBay. He was having problems, all kinds of bad luck, and I think that's how Kevin found out about it. I've heard this. I've done so many stories on this, or if it was Jason that found out about Kevin's box. Anyway, it was the box was originally on eBay, but I believe his is the only original one. The other ones, people have put together Dybbuk boxes and made a lot of money off of them, and you know how eBay goes. I wouldn't buy anything off of eBay.
No.
Okay, so yes.
Yeah, well, that's very fascinating. I'm going to have to really look into that, especially since what I'm trying to do in my book is sort of address like a cross-cultural analysis of this, in addition to the traditional like Western Christianity type things. I really do want to look into all the Abrahamic religions and Buddhism, Hinduism, Eastern religions, and Native American religions. I sort of want to do a whole look at that, because there's so many similarities between some of these demons, which I think is, or evil entities sometimes, especially when you're talking about the Near Eastern or Mesopotamian demons and the Native American ones. And so there's a lot of weird crossover in how they are represented.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's kind of interesting, since they were so far apart.
Well, Dr. Lynn, thank you so much for being a guest on my show tonight. It was an honor to have you. Any other fabulous information, and if you start getting the information on those pictures that do show an aura, that would be I would love to have you show our viewers those pictures.
Oh, well, I will keep in touch and close contact, and I will send you those as I have them. And when I get the recording, I will send that over too, so you can hear the strange voices that emanate from this psychic as she examines these artifacts and cuneiform tablets.
Oh my God, I'd love to hear that. Let's see, I guess that's about it. And on how do you want me to send you that link to that fella's? He's on Facebook. I friended him the other day. I'm not sure if he'll come on my show. I'm going to try. And do you get on Facebook much?
So I'm off and on there. I get flooded sometimes. So if you could just send it to my email, Heather@drheatherlynn.com, I'll get it there.
I will do that.
That'd be the best.
I will, honey. And thank you again
Great.
so much for being on the show. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, it was so wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good night. Thank you. Oh, and happy Halloween.
Have a great night.
Thank you, too.
And a happy Halloween.
Thank you. Same to you. Bye.
Good night.
Oh, gosh. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. It was such an honor and a pleasure to have Dr. Lynn on my show. Everybody, thanks so much for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. Something different. I really enjoyed listening to her and her stories. Anyway, everybody, thanks so much. It was a nice crowd tonight. I hope you have a great Halloween. This is the last show of the month. We're coming up close to the end of the year as well. This year went by so fast this year. Dave unfortunately won't be doing a live show tonight. They have internet problems where he's at. I guess the storms are really bad. Of course, we don't have any rain, but everybody else seems to be having rain. And thanks to my mods for being here with me again tonight. If you all please would make sure, if you would please give my show a like. And if you haven't subscribed, would you please subscribe to my channel? I'd appreciate it. Hope you're all going to have a good Halloween and do some fun things. I'm going to probably be over my daughter's having dinner and watching scary movies and giving out Halloween candy. So everybody, do you want me to do shout outs? I can do some shout outs. B Singer 11, Jesse Machuca, Griffin Cochran, Kevin Hammer, Carrie Eastwick Casaneta, Maria Amador, Sweet Annie, Emma Bajic, Trent Bennett, Joker SDN, F Warrior, haven't seen you for a while, yay, thanks for coming. Maria Amador, Butterfly Kisses, yay. Lynn Bowling, nice to see you. Mary Dallas, awesome guys. Lily, hi Lily. Janice Bolt, The Unseen Scene, Shelley Kudera, Margarita Harvorth, Morrow Madness, Princess Patricia, Lully Tubi, Royce Hinman, thanks Royce. Nebit, oh gosh, wait a minute. Oh man, that went so fast. Nebit Seta, Sweet Hindi, Nicole Burnett, Hippie Hugs, and with Love Michelle, Emmy Mummy, Aaron Belkey. Oh my gosh, wait a minute. Glenda Marks. Okay, Shelley Phelps, Jill Forbes, nice guys. Hey, thanks for coming in tonight. Scary Larry, yay, it's been a long time, Scary Larry. Chippa Terry, Roxanne, Scowling Wolf, TYB, Spooky Raven. Hey, give good thoughts to Spooky Raven. She had surgery. Anybody else want to shout out? Oh gosh, hey, okay, oh my God. Don't forget, Elisa Knox. Don't forget, next Thursday, we're doing a live Ouija session with Karen A. Dahlman. We're setting that up, and Red Sovine, we're setting that up. So Debbie Gale, I'm going to be putting out a message. If you have any questions for the Ouija board, you can send them to this email that we've set up, and I will have a little message too as to what you can and can ask. Karen had sent me a message, and I'm going to put that out. So this is going to be a really good show next week. I can't wait. It's going to be a live Ouija board session. This is the first time they have ever done that, and they had contacted. Cherry K. Montalbano, Janet W. They had contacted the spirits, the good spirits through the Ouija, and they were very happy for me to do that for them. So I've been accepted and I've been okayed by the spirits to do this for them. Emma Bejic. So it's going to be awesome. I'll send out the link. I'll send out the information on the questions and where you could send your question to. And Robert's going to help me. And hi Doppelganger, and Mary Dallas. Yes, and he's going to read the questions to Karen, and Karen in turn will be using the Ouija board with her partner. So I'm really excited about that. So that should be a really interesting show. And so that's about it. And also, if anybody wants to get on the list for show reminders, I try to send them out on Wednesday night. It's, oh God, what is it? Oh my God, I'll have to send the link out. I'll send the link out. It's on my website, paranormalzone.tv. I still have that website that I have, paranormalzone.tv, and then just go to the tab where it says contact, and then and I'll also post if you want to send me your email, then I can send you out reminders. Okay? Is there anybody I missed? Debbie Bass, hi. Anybody else? Lost Zoo. Oh yeah, you're late. It's over. I hope you feel better, Spooky Raven. I hope you feel better, honey. So, anybody else want to shout out? And I'll be sending out information about the shows on Google Plus, and I'll send out the information as well. I'll send out two emails to the to my list that I have. It's almost 100 people, and I'll send out that list of where to send your question and the information about what you can ask. Okay. Anybody else? So Janice Bolt. Yes, everybody. Good night. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. Have a wonderful Halloween. Don't eat too much candy, and watch those scary movies, and be safe, okay? And that's it. So I'm going to say good night. I hope you enjoyed the show. And everybody, thank you again so much. It's such a pleasure to have you at my shows. I can't tell you enough how much I enjoy and love all you guys, okay? Thank you so much. And I'll be having Dave soon, too, on the show. We're going to talk about some of the locations that he's been to when he gets back. So I think tomorrow night he may try to go live. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we'll be posting. I'll be posting for him too if his shows go live. Okay, everybody. Good night. I love you, and I'm feeling much better. Thank you so much. Oh, BC Bounds. Oh yeah, this is going to go right into, immediately it'll go right into archives. So you can just go to my front page on my channel and you can just pick up the show, okay? Oh wait, what do you want me to wait for? What, Griffin? What? Keep Kelly in your thoughts. She is going through tests. Okay, Kelly Griffin. Everybody, please keep Kelly Griffin in your prayers for her, please. She's been through a lot. Thanks, Royce. So you guys can all go to my front page. This will be going right into archives. Yes, Kelly Griffin is very talented. Okay, guys, good night, and God bless you all, and have a safe weekend, okay? Good night. Thank you so much.